What's up? What's up? What's up? Hey guys, and welcome to the Find Your Flow podcast. My name is Mike Graham, and I'm your guide and host as we go on this incredible adventure together. This podcast is all about talking to ordinary people who are living an extraordinary life, people who have found their flow, people who are flowing, people who sometimes unflow and reflow. And the idea is to inspire some of you in the audience, listeners, to pursue your flow, whatever that might mean to us or to you as the audience, and then to have the courage and bravery to chase that. Because that, my friends, is one of the most exciting things you can do. So listen, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I'd like to welcome our guest, Nazia Khatun. Khatun, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mikey. I love how you still call me Khatun. I love it.
We were actually just talking, right? We've known each other 8-9 years, huh? Yeah. So Nazia is somebody that I met 8-9 years ago in London. An incredible woman. She runs her own personal fitness business, but she does so much more. She does it almost as a way to coach and mentor women in her community from her background to really become more of who they are. And she inspires so many women. She's a public speaker. She's been featured on magazines. She's just an all-round wonder woman, right? I don't know if that introduces you well enough, but...
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. It's crazy because you were at the beginning of my journey when I started this Reborn, and I remember just how chaotic everything was. And where I am now is just like, whoa, that's like it's like day and night comparing me to that person 8 years ago. And now where I am today, it's crazy.
Yeah. Nazia, tell us, listen, before we get started, tell the guys a little bit about you, a little bit about what you do, maybe some of your work, because I think that's so inspirational. That was one of the big reasons I wanted to get you on this podcast. I think there's so many interesting angles we can talk about with you, right? Your background from your community, what you do for a business, the way you impact women, right? I think there's so many, maybe there's more as well. But give us a bit of a flavor of you, and then let's talk about the flow and stuff.
Yeah, so I started the journey probably about 10 years ago, deciding I want to leave my 9-to-5 job and not having a clue about business. I just knew I just wanted to do what my passion was and do something that I love. And I knew I was good at fitness. I used to be an amateur boxer growing up in my 20s, but I also had a lot of...
Wait. You were an amateur boxer?
Yeah, in my 20s. You knew that.
I know that, but you say that so casually, like, oh yeah, I was an amateur. I mean, is every girl from your community like an amateur boxer? Is that just...
It's so weird because it's like such an old part of my history.
Yeah.
When I was in that age, I used to be like, yeah, I'm an amateur boxer. But now it's just like, okay, it doesn't define me anymore. But I guess when people hear I was an amateur boxer, it's like, wow. And I think we all forget our wowness sometimes in so many different ways. So yeah, I like that. We forget our wowness, what makes us unique. So I used all of that experience, and like most of my followers know that I struggle with an eating disorder. In our community, we don't speak about it. The mainstream fitness has a huge impact on our mental health, defining how we should look, the standards of beauty for a female. And then I realized there was nobody really talking about issues in my community, the people that look like me. The brown skin.
What community are you from? Sorry,
I mean,
I know your community, but
yeah, I mean, my parents, look, I come from a Bangladeshi background. Both my parents are Bangladeshi and Muslim upbringing. Our culture is very rich, very exciting, very passionate people, but it still comes up with a lot of restriction and pressures of how to be an Asian female. The stereotype being, be a wife, have children, get a 9-to-5 job, all that kind of stuff. And without realizing it, I reckon how do I say, I broke some of the barriers and the stereotypes, even just being an amateur boxer, telling my parents I'm not going to marry at a certain age and everything. So I just been on a crazy journey.
Where do you think this came from, Nazia? Were you like this when you were little? Did you meet, like, what was it, something that happened to you when you were like 17, 18? Because to be boxing from where you're from at 19, 20 is not exactly ordinary, is it?
No, I know. I love the question you just asked me, because I spent all of last year in therapy to find out why I am the way I am. And I failed relationship made me dig a bit more deeper into my attachment styles and the need to be loved, I guess, growing up.
Mm.
And I discovered like our childhood has everything to do with who we are as a mechanism, and how we were brought up with the emotional needs being met, how we define ourselves growing up and everything. And I do a lot of this with the girls upstairs, and it's getting rid of their traumas, healing them and everything. And I came to a point last year, I was like, okay, I'm uncovering parts of me to rediscover the other parts of me, but I have to go back in the past just to see who I was. And listen, I grew up with parents, Bangladeshi immigrant parents, who came to this country at a very young age. My mother came here, I was born, it was crisis economically, financially. I don't know what her mental stress was like. And watching all of that, I think I made a point in my life where I decided a point in my life, I don't want to be this. This was, I don't want to be this.
Did you make that quite early, do you think?
Yeah, at the age of 8. At the age of
8. You remember the age.
Yes, because I had to do the whole therapy, and I discovered like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it was a very pivotal point in my childhood. Obviously, you forget growing up. And since then, I feel like I've just been rebelling against the culture with what I'm expected to be as a Bangladeshi woman. And there's layers.
It's interesting you choose the word rebel, right? Because I think when you're 8, obviously you look at something and you go, I don't want this, right? So then your initial instinct is, nah, I don't want it, right? So then you go on this path of rebellion, right? Yeah. But it's interesting you're sharing, and thank you for sharing, you're sharing the concept that you did therapy last year, and that took you back, and now you almost have this, not acceptance, but this understanding of maybe why the background was the way it was from your parents, right?
100%.
And I think that's quite a peaceful place to be, isn't it? So that must be, like, instead of having that, because I think rebellion is quite a, not it's an emotion from a place of, I think peaceful is a much better place to be at, isn't it?
Yeah, there's this author called Matthew Said. I don't know if you've come across his work. And he wrote this book. Oh man, I forget the title of the book. But anyway, he explained being rebellious is not always a bad thing. Every person who's rebelled are the ones that have become the big changes in society, the ones that's broken the social mold, the social norms, the one that are making the big impact. So we have this idea that rebellious means bad, or you're going to become this chaotic person in society.
It's like a negative, it almost has a negative connotation.
Yeah. And so when I spun that around, I didn't define myself as rebellious. I was told I was always rebellious and criticized for it, but I know I wasn't doing it on purpose. It was just the nature of, I knew the agenda for myself, and I just didn't want people to actually dictate what I needed to do.
Interesting.
But you fall into that trap, because I still went to uni. I still went to get a job as my parents wanted me to do. And then the whole idea of getting married, that's when the real rebelliousness came in. Because my parents wanted me to be something that they wanted, but I didn't want that for myself. You know, you just know that there's something more bigger for you, but you don't know what it is. And this goes back to when you and I met. Like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know how to do it. Like, who am I to find myself in this place? And fitness industry is saturated. And then somehow everything just fell into place. The more I was healing, the more I was experiencing Nazia, the more I was experiencing my own emotional history. It was crazy, because I picked out all these points. I go, well, imagine how many other Nazias there are out there struggling. And at the age of 30, I went through like this whole years of going through depression, because I had stopped boxing. I wasn't married. I was comparing myself to a lot of people around me, and it just got too much. And this is probably the time you and I met, around that time, I reckon.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very dark time for me, because I knew there was a part of me that knew what she wanted to be, but there's a part of me that didn't know how. And the how was the most hardest place to be in. So all these expectations, the pressures from my parents, and then there's this whole idea of, who am I? I'm Nazia, I'm Bangladeshi, I'm Muslim, I'm living in a Western country, I'm a woman. Like, who, all these 5 things makes me up, but I don't know how to be this wholesome person. And then it just went from there. And the depression part of was the most insightful part of my awakening, I guess, as well, because that's where Fitness Reborn came in. That's where I discovered the whole brand.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, how has fitness helped me? Because in my 20s, fitness didn't help me. It was all about being this attractive female, having the six pack. I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with mental issues, being a performer, being a boxer in a male-dominated society, in a male-dominated sports, rather, should I say, and being a female of color as well. Like you stand out, like what the hell?
Yeah, you stand out.
Yeah.
But it's interesting even listening to you talk about your fitness journey, because yeah, you did boxing, right? You then obviously had your suffering through your 20s. You then found a way to flow into taking the lessons that you learned, and a lot of them are a mixture of both of those times, right? From your boxing days, where you have the technical know-hows of like how to do a squat, how to do, all that kind of stuff, and you have a lot of knowledge on that. And then on top of that, you also link it beautifully, I think, with the work you did on yourself psychologically, and you link that to the sport. I think with me, it's the same. With my Ironman background, now with my jiu-jitsu, with what I did, I think sport always links. It is part of maintaining. But listen, let's talk about it. What do you think flow is? Like, you have found, I think, you're an individual that inspires others. That we know we go out of flow. All that makes sense. But what does flow mean to you? To mean a life of flow, what does it mean?
So straight away, my beautiful brain just picked up on
my beautiful brain.
Beautiful brain, the feminine energy. That's what flow is for me, right? So if I just touch on it very quickly, as a woman of a Bangladeshi background, being in a Western country, being brought up here, I've been brainwashed to be in my masculine energy all the time, the hustling, the being ambitious, the going for the goals. I don't know if you remember, do you remember every time you and I met, like, Mikey, I want to do this, I want to do that, Mikey, I need to be there, help me, blah, blah, blah. I stopped doing all of that now. And therapy taught me, like, as a female, I'm going to be 80% in my feminine energy. And because of where I am, I'm forced to be in my masculine energy all the time. So it doesn't work for me most of the time. So now I've stepped more into my higher version of myself, but in my feminine energy, everything's just easy. Everything's just so much more calmer for me. Whereas the old Nazia, it was just chaotic. Like, I was breaking habits, but then I kept going back to these habits. And now this year, like, I taught a workshop the other day, healing the wounded feminine energy. And we don't realize how many of us needed healing or need healing through our own trauma, through our own father wounds, mother wounds. Our relationships have a huge impact on everything that we are right now. And going back to this question of what flow means, it's just, for me, it's like, just be. You are where you're meant to be and you're doing amazing. Just accept where you are, which is sometimes really hard as well, because we feel like we're behind or we need to be doing X, Y, and Z. But coming back to the core, and that's in alignment of where am I now? Who is Nazia, basically? That was a very mouthful, wasn't it?
No, that was beautiful, because I think I have kind of a similar concept. I think that when you look at flow, it's this concept where I think it's where life works for you, right? Like, where there's a series of alignments that you need to have in your life, but then life just seems to be easy. For example, it's interesting listening to you. You're talking about your feminine energy is the thing that allows you to, for example, you said, when we used to meet, because we know each other from a business background first, and then we became friends, right? I helped you kind of get your fitness business off the ground 9 years ago. And then we developed a beautiful friendship. But I think, back then in London, it was very much like, have your KPIs, have your targets, have this, have that. And it's interesting listening to you talk about your feminine energy enabled you to not need that kind of approach, and yet still flow and still be who you are, right? What is interesting listening to that is, obviously now I live in Malaga, I live in Spain. I don't set myself targets anymore neither, right?
Wow, really?
So I've gone away from that totally, right? But it's an interesting perspective, because when you talk about flow, you mentioned the concept of things should just work for you, right?
Yeah.
So things, it's like a door that's easy to push kind of thing, I think would be a good analogy. And but you get that power or that ability from your feminine energy. Is that?
Yeah. I'm very intuitive. Like the work that I do is under the premises of helping people knowing what they come through as soon as they step through the door. Beautiful gift I've harnessed and I've accepted it. That's what makes me a very beautiful coach, to get people through the journey. Like understanding what the traumas are, identifying it before they even told me what it is. And I've just become so great at it. And like
I love this. I
I'm
am
so good at it.
you know, one thing I've always loved about you, Nazia, and I think we bring this out of each other a little bit. We are so good at promoting the shit out of ourselves. You know, we're
Why
like,
not?
we are great, but why not? Why not?
Exactly. Nobody else is going to be here promoting me. So I might as well do it myself, right?
Yeah,
But I think it's taken me a while to understand the beauty of my work instead of just saying or second guessing the work, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And where I spent so much time second guessing my work, I spent too much time wasting those years showing up for the people that need me. And the people that need me are the ones that are going to join the tribe, the flow. Do you get it? So like how you say, it's funny you say this, Mike, that you don't do goal setting and everything anymore, because I'm a very disorganized person, right?
Yeah.
And I often think about you with that little board and your goal.
Listen. I still write down like my monthly goals or my weekly goals, but I don't do KPIs and all this kind of stuff anymore. I've kind of found a different way to flow, right? I think the flow changed, and I think, I think it's interesting listening to how you describe it, because, you know, it's almost very similar to kind of how I look at it, but you use with you, it almost starts with that feminine energy. And I think that probably, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting, it's an interesting source of the power.
Yeah, it's a beautiful dance that I just describe it as. And you got to know who and what you're dancing with. And the whole thing comes from what are you about at the end.
So listen, with you, right? You started at 8 years old, you had this epiphany, right? Where you were like, rebel, you know, and then you became an amateur boxer when you were 19, 20. You then went through this difficult period in your life in your 20s with the eating disorder. You then had the pressures of obviously your culture with the whole marriage situation. You then started your fitness business and you started empowering other women, and you've just flowed through to where you are now in life, right? But how did you discover your flow? Was it through going? I mean, it sounds like it was a lot of ups and downs. But how did it come to you? Was it like one big event? Was it like for me, for example, this last year was massive in terms of how I learned to flow, right? For me, it was huge. But what was it for you? Do you think it was just part? Yeah, what was it?
So I think in life, we're all having a human experience, and it's all test and trial, isn't it? Right? These tests and trials show you what you like about yourself, what you don't like about yourself. Whatever you don't like, you go and change, or you try to change. And there's certain things that we at the core that makes us who we are. Yeah. And I tried everything here and there, like, you know, having a structure, having this, having that. And then even with like the lead generation, remember we used to speak about lead generation and stuff. And one of the beautiful things that I've learned to do is put the intention out there. I meditate heaps. I meditate. I try to pray as much as I can. I try to just do all those other things other than the fitness stuff. And somehow when you decide you want something and you are adamant and you have complete faith in the flow of whatever you want, I don't know, something just opens up and then you just get it. It's just understanding that you can receive things as well. And the receiving part of me was just saying, okay, I'm going to be patient here. I know this is going to be mine. I know I'm going to need this, but let me just enjoy the life going towards the end, you know, wherever I want. Let me just enjoy being who I need to be, whether it's having fun, whether it's being whoever I need to be. Okay. And it's just test and trial. What works for me is not maybe working for somebody else. What works for somebody else is not going to work for me. And the more I stepped into, I think this is where the magic was, the more I stepped into my real self, my authentic self, the one that I wasn't scared to show up as.
Mm,
Like with my highs, my lows, my flaws, whatever it was, I
mm,
found life was just so much more easier because we're always trying to wear a mask. We're trying
mm,
to impress people. We're trying to show
mm,
up for other people rather than ourselves. So
mm,
when I decided, and this was a couple of years ago, when I decided, okay, I'm just going to be Nazia.
mm,
Nazia, who is Nazia? Then I had to go and ask who she is. The
mm,
playfulness, the nurturer, the loving, the one that loves to laugh, the one that likes to have a blast in her sessions, the
mm,
one that is serious, the one that can be childish, childlike. Do you see?
mm,
And all of these things makes us who we are as an individual. And it's just, and then it just happened
mm,
naturally. But I reckon for me, it was literally going from living in my masculine energy more into my feminine energy that allowed that flow to happen as well.
mm,
And men have the feminine energy
mhm.
and females have the masculine energy as well. It's just knowing what parts to use it and where really.
That's so interesting. So you think, right, or the way you look at it, right, with what you do to maintain your flow, or really to have your flow is to knowing kind of what you like to do, right?
Mm,
Knowing what you like to do, what you're
yes,
passionate about,
absolutely.
connecting with that. For you, obviously, it was your fitness journey,
Yeah.
right? Your fitness was your almost your vehicle through that journey, right? Your car through that journey.
Yeah.
You then obviously did a lot of work on yourself, right? You did a lot of therapy, a lot of personal development.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we even went to personal development events together,
Yeah,
right?
that's how we met though at personal
That's how we
development
met,
event.
right?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you did a lot of work on yourself. You went through that process. And then it sounds to me almost like you've accepted part of being in flow for you. You've got your prayer, you've got
Yeah.
your fitness,
Yeah.
you've got I think the almost your mission really, which is to empower and help other women, right? And then I think the almost what you're kind of saying almost is you've accepted that certain parts are the way they are. Like for example, with your parents, right? You've kind of had that peace. It is the way it is. What they want is not what you want,
Yeah.
and it doesn't align, and that's fine. They're still your parents. You still love them. They still love Nazia, and you can be. So I think it's an interesting one as well. Like I've kind of learned this a little bit in the last year that in business sometimes we think we have to be so serious and uptight and blah blah
That's,
blah. And I've
yeah.
kind of learned to just be a bit more jovial and fun, and it's been beautiful because I've noticed how my clients have opened up more. We have such more beautiful connections, much more beautiful conversations, and in the end, I can actually help them way better.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. When we understand that we're all here having the same
The
experience in
same
different ways.
experience.
Yeah.
Honestly, I realized this right 2 months ago, right? Because obviously through life we have friends, right? And we
Yeah.
ask them for advice, right? Like relationship advice, work advice,
Yeah.
fitness advice, fucking all the advices, right? One of my best friends, right? I'm not going to name him, right? But one of my best friends, he gives me great advice most of the time, right? 99% of the time, great advice, right?
Yeah.
And he asks me for advice. My advice is más o menos, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, right?
Oh my God.
But I realized 2 months ago when I asked him advice for the same thing, right? The same thing that I asked before, and he gave me something totally different opinion, right? And it made me realize we might think we've got it all together. We figured it all out. We don't have a clue what's happening half the time. Life just happens.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of it, though, with life happening in terms of how we show up. And it's the mask that we wear, really and truly. It's the mask. And in the Japanese, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of this. We wear three masks, one for ourselves,
Mm.
one for our family, and then one we wear for the outside world. That's your work colleagues, strangers, and stuff.
Wait. Family,
Family,
you,
yourself, and that like work people, strangers.
right,
And the
right.
mask that we really need to show up is the one that we wear for ourselves. Like, who are we when we are sitting in a room by ourselves? That could be, some people are just quiet naturally. Some people need to be doing something. Some
Yeah,
people are out there.
yeah.
I realize, I go, wow, I used to really believe I was an extrovert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I reckon I am an extrovert by nature, but there's parts of me in the last 10 years, I'm actually a proper introvert. I don't,
Nazia,
yeah,
Nazia, snap, right?
yeah,
Like I realized this in the last year. Like I think we're both quite outgoing, bubbly people, right? So
yeah,
automatically we fall in the bubble of extrovert, right?
That's
But
right. Yeah.
actually, there's weekends where I like to lock myself in my apartment and I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to anybody in the world, you
And I
know?
think that's a beautiful sign, though, of growing up as well, though, Mike. Like when I was an amateur boxer in my early 20s, everybody wanted to know who I was. And I was actually a very, very shy individual growing up, like
Mm,
especially at university.
mm,
Now I do public speaking. I'm like, well, how the hell was I shy when I was young? But
yeah,
you find your pace, you find out who you are and the layers of who we are. It's interesting. That makes us fascinating people. Like you might, like when I look at you, I might think of a different perception to how the other person sees you. But because
absolutely.
I know you, it's like, okay, now it's getting to know Mikey 10 years later. You totally changed. And
Totally.
it's interesting you say that because when people think I'm an extrovert, I go, you have no clue.
Yeah.
I do not. I take more pride in being alone. I enjoy my company. And
I
you know,
love being alone. Honestly,
I
I
would
love it.
never, I
Yeah.
would never had said that to anybody like a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
maybe even 5 years ago, but I enjoy being me now.
You know what is interesting listening to you talking about this, like how to find your flow and how you maintain it? A lot of what you're saying, a lot of what you're saying is about acceptance, right? It's about
100.
connecting. It's about connecting with who you are. So, for example, you can be an introvert and
Yeah.
you can be an extrovert, sorry, and yet still be introverted.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can be from a Muslim Bangladeshi background and be a very respected in that community and as a woman and not be married, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can change, you can do things that are polar. I realized with myself, for example, the whole extrovert introvert, there's certain things that, for example, there's so many things and they're just not coming to my mind right now, but it's this concept that you can have different sides of you that
100%.
maybe are contradictory, maybe they
Yeah.
seem contradictory, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's just who you are. It's just part of the flow.
But I think I love that though. That's what makes us complex human beings.
Mm,
And you know, the whole premises of the work that I do with the neuroscience and the fitness
mm,
is I have a crazy clients that come through the door. Like I have this multimillionaire, then I have this lady who is a CEO of a global advertising business and everything. And it's how they show up with the label of the identity that they put themselves into and how people
yes,
perceive them. And if
yes.
you take away all of the labels and whatever it is, at the core, every single one of us are struggling with something, and it's knowing how to be compassionate to the human experience that we're all having. Like I'm very, very blunt. I don't
That's
care what
beautiful. That's
clients think
beautiful.
of me. I don't care if they like me. My job isn't to be liked. You're paying me for a service. I'm gonna tell you the harsh truth and nothing but the truth. Like I just had a client just before I came on the call to you now, and she's telling me about her relationship, and I'm just giving her advice. I go, your age, I messed up by being in toxic relationships or even giving energy to things that I shouldn't have given. And
Mm,
it wastes your youth, it takes up your time, your energy, and you haven't got time on your side anymore.
mm,
Right? Every hour we're taking on, life is short. Go
mm,
and live. And it's like, oh my God, oh my God, it's like giving them a wake up call. And right now,
mm,
I think the world needs a wake up call to go
mm,
back to who they are, who they were born as, because we've just taken a whole different detour. And all
mm,
we're doing is coming back home to ourselves. And coming
mm,
back home to ourselves can be so beautiful, so
mm,
chaotic, so
mm,
messy, so grand. And it's
mm.
everything in between and more.
Yeah. I mean, listen, part of the reason I kind of wanted to start this podcast story is because I think for myself, the last year or so,
Yeah.
I really found connected with my flow, right? Like
Yeah.
I think it's interesting you're talking about the sports, you obviously know my background, you know that I did Ironmans, I ran marathons, I did all that kind of endurance stuff. And I did that as a way to build an identity that was separate to Mike, the business guy, to I
Yeah.
wanted Mike the Ironman. Now my identity, I don't do that endurance sport, but I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is
Yeah.
now a big part of my identity. And I think the beautiful thing about sport,
Yeah.
especially when you're this, but I think, when you're running a marathon, when you're being in jiu-jitsu fighting, when you're doing, the sports you do with your clients, sport is a very real mirror to yourself as an individual of who you
100.
really are, right? I think
Absolutely.
I think in those moments where it gets shitty, where it's just horrible and it's like, this sucks. That is a real test of who you are as an individual, and that's not a good or bad thing. It's just, who are you? And I think that experience of who are you is a very rare thing to get. And I think it's something that people get from sport, right? I think when you look at how do you maintain your flow, for me, I think one thing we both have in common is we're both very passionate about fitness. We're both very passionate about sport, right? And I think for both of us, that is like a thing that we have to have, like a pillar to our flow house to stay. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I say this to all of my clients, especially the females. Anything in life that you are going through right now, always go to the basic foundation is learning how to move your body. The human body was designed to move. And I say this to all of my girls and on my social media as well. Like, the brain was designed to keep you safe and in survival. That's what it's meant to do. After survival and keeping you safe, the main thing is concerned with is freedom, right? The enemy of freedom is control. What are we all humans doing in our lives nowadays? Is controlling every single part of our life. Where alarm clock controls us waking up. The social media, this thing here is controlling all our lives right now, isn't it? From who we are to our relationships to our business, everything. And when we try to control, even for me, having an eating disorder was control. Having a sport was controlling me not overeating. It's crazy when I think about it.
It's such an interesting thing you say, Nazia, because when you think about it, right, like even the concept of relationships, for example, we know each other's background in terms of our relationships, but I think even when you look at the way relationships should be, listening to you talk about your community background, right, there's an expectation to be married, right? Different cultures are different, of course. But I think there's also an expectation of how relationships should be, right? One of my best friends, he recently had a 10-year relationship end, right? They were together from 21 to 31, big heartbreak, and now they don't even talk, right? They don't even talk. And I find that a little bit, I find that interesting. I find it interesting, right? Because we have this concept in relationships that when you break up, you don't talk to anybody anymore. There's so many concepts, like not just work is another one. Where do you work? How do you work? Do you work remote? Do you, if you can work from anywhere, you can live anywhere.
I mean, I think there's so much beauty in those expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't make the rules. Somebody else made the
rules. Who made the rules? Yeah. Who told us? Who said you have to wait, you have to go to work at 9 a.m.? Who? I don't know. Society has so many rules that I find very interesting. It's a little bit like when you were a kid, right? And your mom and dad would be like, don't do this. And you were like,
you do it.
You were like, why? And they were like, because I told you so. And you're like, that's like the words, like, what? I feel a lot of times society does that to our lives. It kind of goes, work like this, love like this, pray like this, be like, and it's why, who.
Fascinating though, Mikey. I feel like we've both been on a beautiful journey in different ways, and having this conversation with you as well, and knowing how you were when we first met, right? Everything just seems calm. Everything just feels peace. Like when I'm talking to you, there's so much more, you seem more grounded, and I feel a lot more grounded in the last 4 or 5 years, especially this year more. And it's like really knowing certainty. The most confident person in the room is the one who's certain about who they are, right? And being confident is something that we become magnetic and attractive to other people. And I think one of the things is knowing how to harness that energy as well. And going back to this rules of where we are with who we're supposed to be, if you can just find your own natural flow, like waking up when it suits you. Like nowadays, my morning routine is about praying, meditating. I do a journal, and I show this to people to how to regulate their own central nervous system.
Yeah, journaling, honestly, journaling for me has been something that I've become big on in the last 10 months.
Yeah.
And it's revolutionized my life, you know, and I don't mean that in a low down or big way. Honestly, it's been amazing just getting your feelings out, you know. And I think maybe for guys, it's a little bit, maybe it's not, maybe I'm just being, you know, it's a brush, but I feel we sometimes struggle to explain our emotions, right? You know, I come from a culture where men aren't, you know, being Brazilian, we're not very, you know, descriptive about how we feel, right?
You say that, but since the time I've known you, I don't know, I haven't spoken to you properly in the last 5 years properly, but you were very, very okay with expressing, you know, maybe there are parts of it that you probably kept hidden.
I think that's exactly it. That's exactly it, right? So it's a choice of how much to express, right? Whereas now it's much rawer, right? And I think it's interesting, the whole concept of what you're talking about when maintaining flow, there's this process of accepting kind of who you are, the good, the bad, not good or bad. It's not good or bad. It's just, it is who you are, right? Society kind of dictates what's good, what's bad and all. No, there are certain things that are bad. There are certain things that are bad, but generally speaking, you know, it is kind of who you are. Like one thing, for example, that made me realize this was I reconnected with we were talking about earlier, I reconnected with my faith this last year, right? I was raised Catholic. To be honest, I was raised Christian. To me, you know, I don't want to offend anyone listening to this, but to me, it's the same, right? Christianity, I think, but the thing is, I also believe in a lot of concepts from the universe, right? So to me, it's all, you know, it's not that one is right, one is wrong. I think it's just, I like both of them, right? I would go with you to a mosque and pray, and I would find that a beautiful maybe we should do that next time. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, actually.
No, you are. Of course you are. Of course you are.
That would be beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's one of the things you're saying is accepting who you are, having the fitness as one thing that keeps you connected with your body, doing something that you enjoy doing, right? And then you said things like journaling, praying. You know, I think as well, one thing you're very big on is your constant development of yourself, right? That seems
absolutely.
Because I'm thinking, like, how does Nazia maintain her flow, right? And that seems to be some of the things you've talked about.
And you know what's another thing that you just mentioned, the religious part. I grew up in a Muslim household, and because there was all these expectations and pressures to be a good Muslim, at some points in my life it got really confusing with culture and religion. So when it gets really intense, I used to abandon it. I used to abandon everything, and I'll be like, okay, what now then? But in the last 6-7 years, I would say I've become so congruent with
beautiful. Good word.
With everything. And the 5 prayers a day is what connects me to this version of myself that keeps calm.
So do you pray 5 times a day?
I am, man. I have been.
Wow, hey, that's
for the
great.
last 3 years, you know, you have your days where you're not so consistent and everything. But I feel like Islam has had all the answers all along, right? From the gratitude list that I do in Islam, we have, you know, the more you're grateful for, the more I will give. When you're bowing down with our forehead down, scientific in yoga, they found out the connection between the forehead and, you know, our pineal gland and the ground, and how it absorbs all the great energy, the earthing, you know, all this stuff. It's already there. It's written for us. Like, you know, like some of my favorite Quran verses, there's so much power in there.
So much power. It's beautiful.
And then you think about when you're listening to something, the calming effects, the hertz, the frequencies that we absorb into our body and how it changes us. Then we're thinking about, I've lived my whole life listening to, you know, Eminem and this way and the beat.
It's a totally different.
Now when I go to sleep, it's like, how do I rewire my subconscious brain to give me a new self-concept of who I am? And how do I want to show up? And these are all the things that I've tried and error for myself. If it's worked for me, it's going to work for my clients. And I take them on a journey, and it's so beautiful because I witness a human being coming to me depressed, suicidal. They've just gone through divorce. They've gone through domestic violence. And I take them on this beautiful journey, and they evolve. And I'm like, whoa, your anxiety is gone. Your depression is gone. Your worrying is gone. You are liking yourself more. And my first pillar of the program is self-love. Loving yourself means you choose more for yourself. There's boundaries. You make your own rules up. And then, I'm not so strict with my fitness anymore. Like when I had an eating disorder, it was like, oh my God, I've eaten this, I don't eat that anymore.
One thing for me, it's so interesting listening to you say this, right? And I know you've got to go shortly, which is a shame because I'm loving this chat.
No,
But I think Iron Man, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
very intense environment, right? Everything is ba, 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 ba. What I love about jiu-jitsu, and it's just interesting how it's happened. Jiu-jitsu is a sport where I can train 5 times a week, twice a day if I want to. I can also train 1 time a week, and I get the same, not the same benefit, but where I am in life during that period, jiu-jitsu fits into it very nicely. And because I've started to look at my fitness more as a, that I've had that connection to it rather than such an intense, it has to be done. I have to do 5, I have to go and run 30 Ks this weekend or whatever, right? That's flowed into other parts of my life. Totally.
Listen, fitness saved me from a lot of things I can't even imagine. Okay. And I think the problems that we have in society now can be solved if you just dedicated yourself to the gym or that you like.
I agree.
Mental health, every single person who's a human have mental health issues. I don't care whether you're rich,
totally.
you're model, whatever. I don't care how many cars you have. You're all going to have something that's going to come back to you with your mental health. But if you have fitness, movement as your first thing that you fall back on, it can save yourself.
What is interesting? What is so interesting, Nazia, when we talk about fitness? I think people have a concept of fitness that it has to be extreme, or that it's extreme, right? That it has to be benching fucking 200 kilos or whatever. What I learned with jiu-jitsu, one thing that I've learned in the last year that I love, love. Like I've started learning how to dance.
Have you? Well done.
I've started going to like body movement workshops, right? And I feel that learning fitness doesn't necessarily mean picking up weights and being fucking 6-pack. That doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it's nice to have a 6-pack, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are healthy and that you're fit, right? What I've learned with jiu-jitsu, which is so interesting, is that for me, that sport gives me real life mobility, right? And then doing other things like dancing helps my body movement. Doing things like body workshop helps body movement. So fitness is interesting because I think people always think fitness should mean go running, or, if you don't like running, do something else,
Well, this is the thing that I do on the program. It's taking people away from the mainstream idea of what fitness is.
Yeah.
But the mainstream idea of fitness has caused more harm to young people, men and females, more than anybody else. And when we understand the real essence of mainstream fitness, it is there to profit out of your insecurity. It is there to profit out of what you don't like about yourself. So let's join a tribe, kill yourself. And I've been there. I was a statistic of that premises, right? And when I look at it now, I'm like thinking to myself, the body was designed not by accident. It was made the way it was. This is the vehicle that we have on earth, just like the car that you drive. And if we're not looking after the very essence of the body, because the body is taking us everywhere, bless you, it's making us have this energetic exchange with the world, with people. And depending on how you show up in your physical body, that's exactly the way we're going to be accepted into society as well.
100%.
Like I know my physique.
Listen, 100%. As a guy, right? If I turn up, and I'm sure it's the same as a girl, if I turn up and I look like I'm in physical condition, doesn't mean stud. I don't need to be a stud. Just I look like I look after myself physically. People take you more seriously. They take you with more respect. Your flow in life is much easier than if you don't, and you just feel more confident. You carry yourself differently. Right?
Absolutely. Listen, I think a lot of people don't understand this, right? As humans, we're always judging each other.
Always. It's part of our survival. It's part of our survival. Is that guy stronger than me? Is he going to beat me up? Is he going to take my food? Like it's part of our programming.
Exactly. And I look at how men approach me now compared to when I was in my 20s, right? And it's 2 different ball games, right? Whereas before it was
because you're a more confident person of yourself now.
I attract different types of men, whereas before, I don't know, it was weird. It was, my energy was different. Everything was dictated around how I looked. Guys will approach me because I looked a certain way, right? And the physique I had as a boxer as well.
Yeah.
Now know, I don't look like a boxer. I don't look like so much as a sports person. I'm okay. I've let myself be okay with not looking a certain type or having these expectations. I'm enjoying life more, right?
What is interesting, I think, when you connect with what's interesting, what you're saying, and I connect with this so much. When you find out and you connect with who you are, which is kind of the process you've been through, right? You start to put out a certain flow, a certain vibe that attracts the stuff
100%.
that you want, right? And I find that with myself, since I've started being a bit more who I am and all that kind of, just that type of energy, the conversations I have with people, the people I attract, the things I do in life, I find them so much better, so much richer, so much more enjoyable,
100%. I think one of our beautiful superpowers is, I remember the last time you and I met was in Canary Wharf, and we had such a heart-to-heart conversation. And it definitely made me see you in a different way as well. Like the vulnerability parts of us, we forget that's some of our superpowers.
There's power in that.
Yeah, there's ways that we can connect to people, and there's ways that we connect to ourselves. Because when we're in denial of who we are, that's when we get into trouble a lot.
Yeah.
And the journey that I've been on has been so beautiful, because the more I show up, the more people show up for me. I don't even have to try.
No, listen, I agree. Like, it almost feels like sometimes when you truly connect with that concept of who you are, not that it's good or bad. Like, for example, with me, I can be a Christian and still believe in the universe, like there's so many things that are like that, where you can be abstract, but when you connect with yourself, you start to attract the vibe that makes you happy, that makes you feel fulfilled. And I think that's easier said than done.
I know. Do you remember that saying, the survival of the fittest?
So tell me. Well, listen, this is perfect, actually, because I was going to say, I think you need to get going because you've got a client. So what I wanted to do as a wrap up, I've really enjoyed, I think it's been beautiful, the conversation. Guys, leave some comments, share this episode. Nazia, I've really enjoyed it. I was going to say, to wrap up, maybe leave us with one of your quotes, or maybe what's it called, an idea, but go for it.
So we've always been told in the fitness industry, or generally, survival of the fittest, right? But it's not. It's survival of the one that can adapt to the environment, right? And you're a perfect example of this. I think I am as well. When you can adapt to the people around you, and you can be a chameleon, right?
Yeah.
And you just blend in, it feels almost like you're already there from way before.
It's not survival of the fittest.
It's the survival of the one that can adapt.
Wow.
And if you think, how are you've adapted to your location, your settings. Like, if I think of one person that I know that has moved around the country, the world, like, hats off to you, Mikey. You can go to a different country and you're just happy in Spain, or you're in Brazil, or you're in America. I'm like, this guy, like, I watch your stuff and I'm like, he inspires me. And then one day I'll do it. One day I'll do that. And you just make it look so easy, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? You just literally blend in and you're like part of the furniture within 2 days. But that's the beauty of being attractive, being magnetic, right, with who you are. And that's how you draw the people in. So that's one thing I want to say to people is learn how to adapt. We're not a tree. Jim Rohn said this, I think, or was it Brian Tracy? We're not a tree, move, right? You can and be whoever you want to be. And my journey has, like, I look back at some of the things I've done and I'm like, I've done all of this. Like, and I still feel like I haven't done enough. And I go, for somebody who's been on a journey by herself, right? Finding all of these opportunities, like writing for Adidas, being part of the internship, my work I'm a 3-time award-winning coach. All of this didn't happen by accident. I had to know who the hell I was in order for me to show up and do this. And the work that I do is like, it was way ahead of the game. When I started out, I knew what I needed to do. It was just finding my way. But anyway, I need to wrap up and get going.
That's it. It's been beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for watching. My name's Mike Graham. This has been Nazia Khatun. For now, see you on the next show. Go find your flow.
See you soon.